Dogs. They are said to have evolved from wolves, those wild creatures at one point befriended man and then changed and continued to change so that they could survive and thrive. Which is kind of like SUVs, right? Which were once large, heavy and wild. But today they have been domesticated by the urban jungle, where ease of use, comfort, convenience are of top priority, but they're all dressed up with a whiff of their wild past to make them exciting. And currently, the top dogs vying for your affection are MG's Hector and Kia Seltos. And amazingly, you guys have been most interested in their petrol automatic variants, which is what we've got here. So let's find out now which one of these is a good boy. Now both these boys have handsome faces, but the Hector does look a bit threatening, which is a good thing, and that's because it is bigger and taller. In fact, it is bigger than Honda's CR-V, whereas the Seltos is a bit larger than Hyundai's Creta. But when it comes to striking the right stance, the Seltos looks stronger and better balanced. The Hector does seem a bit greedy from certain angles. Evolving for the urban jungle leads to certain similarities under the skin. Now, being domesticated urban SUVs, 190mm or thereabouts of ground clearance is par for the course, as is monocoque chassis and front-wheel drive architecture. And in keeping with the times, both of these are using turbocharged petrol engines. The Kia uses a 1.4, whereas the MG uses a 1.5. But both of them make about 140 PS of power and use dual clutch transmissions. Interestingly, both of these are priced within 20,000 rupees of each other. So, which one of these has aced the evolution race? Did someone say race? Go! The start itself sets the tone for the rest of the race. In the run from 0 to 100 km an hour, the Seltos is faster than the Hector by 4 seconds. And you might say, who cares? But even in normal driving conditions, going from 20 to 80 km an hour, the gap between the two is around 3 seconds. The gap is down to the Hector's gearbox. It is slow, and it also has another handicap. The MG's dual clutch gearbox is a 6-speeder, which is one less than the Seltos, while it is bigger and heavier. So effectively, it's kind of like the Hector pulling a sled while going uphill, whereas the Seltos is just scampering through the woods. But in the urban jungle, what matters is how obedient your wild companions are. Take the Hector out for a stroll in the city and you'll find that it doesn't quite come to heel when you ask. In stop-go traffic, the gearbox will resist as you tug at the leash, and then suddenly it will bound ahead. The Seltos has adapted very well. It can be graceful or powerful, and that's because the engine and gearbox are just so well coordinated. Then there are the drive modes, which add excitement, practicality, and a little bit of showbazi. The modes affect how the throttle and gearbox respond, and they do work. The sport mode is actually sharp enough that you would want to use it on a closed piece of road or a track, and the normal mode is peppy enough that you would want to use that on a highway. The eco mode is just right for stop-go city traffic. No, it isn't dull, it's right. It feels calm and relaxing. That's also because the cabin is better insulated. Now, talking about fuel economy, well, the Seltos is shockingly good. In the city, it is more fuel efficient than the smaller and less powerful Hyundai Venue. And of course, it is more fuel efficient than the Hector. It betters the Hector by about 3 kpl. And on the highway, the gap widens to 5 kpl. And talking about highways, on an open road, the Seltos can feel quite car-like in a good way. That's because it feels flat, composed, won't toss you around. So the suspension works well on that front, and if you want to have fun, you could do that too because the steering is involving enough and it turns quite crisply and brakes sure-footedly as well. So there's no rolling around or bobbing about here, calm and comfortable. But there is a chink in the armor, and that is, it feels quite car-like when it comes to rough roads or broken roads. You do feel a lot of the sharpness of the surface inside the cabin, and you end up having to tiptoe over these broken roads to keep the occupants from getting jostled around to the bare minimum. Even imperfect city roads are obvious and annoying in the Seltos. Just think about the Creta. If that suspension setup could be had here on the Seltos, it would be epic. The Hector, it feels like a traditional SUV in a good way, and that's when you show it a bad patch of road, because it will just gobble it up quietly. You won't feel the shocks, the thuds, so you can carry a fair amount of pace over poor roads. But then, like a traditional SUV, it also has its downside, which is at high speeds it tends to bob around a bit, and show it a set of corners, it will roll, and it isn't the most fun to steer at high speeds. And especially if you're traveling with your family, drive calmly to treat them well. And the families would like to spend time with the Hector. On longer journeys, your family is likely to prefer the Hector because, well, for 3 abreast, you do have more room here, and that's not all. Even the floor is completely flat, so the middle occupant will be able to sit that much more comfortably. Also, the sense of airiness inside this cabin is really solid, especially because of the large panoramic sunroof. However, the under-thigh support could be better, and well, the room to push your feet forward is a little limited because of the way the front seats are designed. So, if you are a family of 5 and plan to travel over some rough roads, then the MG Hector will be the more comforting companion. For 4 occupants, the Seltos though is the more comfortable option. It's because of the smaller details like the cushioning for the seat, which is a bit firmer and will keep you more comfortable on longer journeys. The scooped out seat backs also help to hold you better, which will keep you comfortable for longer. Then there's the seat back angle, which can be adjusted, right? And aside from this, you have thoughtful touches here like this sunshade, and you might not believe this, but you actually have more headroom on offer here inside the Seltos as well. So taller occupants would be more at ease, and you also have more room to stretch out here if you feel like it. Now the Seltos, it takes care of its people even here in the front. The driver, for instance, can find the right seating position quickly, and that's because you have a range of steering adjustment on offer here, and the seat, even when it's lifted up, gives you good support. And when you look around the cabin, you'll find that it treats you really well. In terms of the finish for the plastics, the materials in the cabin, this just feels like it is a top dog. Top 3 things inside the Seltos. The lane watch system shows you in the MID every time you indicate what's there in the adjacent lanes. And second, the cooled seats. So practical, you will love them on a hot summer's day. And the third thing is the quality of switchgear. These buttons, whether on the steering wheel or for the power windows, just feel so good to use. And there is a very valuable fourth, the air purifier. A must these days. What I would have liked to see more would have been a sound system that actually sounded good. Bose or not, it doesn't quite cut it. And lastly, if there was a panoramic sunroof in this car, killer. Top 3 features in the Hector. Right on top, the sound system. It's really good. And then there's of course that panoramic sunroof. And lastly, the powered tailgate is very useful too. What could the Hector do better? Well, the resolution for the reversing camera definitely needs to be better. It's too grainy right now. And then for the rear occupants, sun blinds would really be helpful considering those windows are really large. But it doesn't quite match up to the Kia or its price tag. Whether it's the finish of the plastics, the stitches on the dash, or the responsiveness of the infotainment system. The top-end Seltos, GTX Plus and the Hector Sharp are also big on safety, packing in 6 airbags, ABS, EBD, traction control, hill hold, front and rear parking sensors, and ISOFIX mounts for child seats. But when it comes to boot space, the Hector absolutely trumps the Seltos. The Hector will wolf your luggage in, while in the Seltos, you might have to cut down a bit. So, which one of these two petrol automatics should you befriend? The MG Hector is a little bit like a Rottweiler. Immediately impressive, looks big and muscular, and it has that wild air about it which makes it so appealing. And that wildness even extends to the way it deals with rough roads, which gives it that proper SUV feel. But the wildness can also be felt in the urban environment, which you have to actually work around, where it starts to feel a little bit grumpy. But if you are taken up with MG's Hector and you want a petrol variant, we'd suggest you look at the petrol hybrid manual and see if that works for you. Which brings us to Kia Seltos, and this is a bit like an Alsatian. It's regal to look at, but not as intimidating or as big as the Hector. And in terms of attitude too, it's really capable and very obedient, just about everywhere, and can do whatever you want whenever you want. But like most dogs, it has its quirks. In this case, ride quality. But on the whole, this is a package for a family that is pretty hard to beat. So now we know who's the good dog.